We're live, okay. Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm Councillor Chris Atwell, Chair of the Planning Committee. Limited public seating is made available. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. The public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble by the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed and everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they're finished. Otherwise, the camera will remain on you. If there is any voting, please can members keep their hands raised clearly until the number of votes have been stated. Okay, let's do some introductions. Shall we start with committee members?
Good morning, Chair. John Smith, Eastern Craneswater Ward.
Good morning, John.
Gerald Vernon Jackson, Milton Ward.
Good morning, Gerald.
Peter Candlish, also Eastern Craneswater Ward.
Good morning, Peter, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Judith Smythe, St Jude Ward.
Good morning, Judith.
Not at all. Mary Vallely, Cosham.
Mary, if I could ask you to get a little closer to...
Mary Vallely, Cosham.
Thank you, Mary, and welcome to the Planning Committee.
Rowan Dent Copner.
And welcome to the Planning Committee. If I can ask officers to introduce themselves.
Good morning, my name's Kieran Laven. I'm one of the Council's planning solicitors.
Thank you, Kieran.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Edward Chapman-Stapleton. I'm the case officer for the Bellway-Tipner report and also will introduce the Coastal Partners item on the agenda, at which point I will then leave the meeting.
Thank you, Edward.
Morning, Chairman and everyone. My name's Simon Turner. I'm the Interim Head of Development Management.
Thank you, Simon.
I'm Jane Dodino, Local Democracy Officer.
And thank you, Jane. Now, if I can ask people giving deputations today to introduce themselves briefly. So if you're speaking today, if you could just use the microphone to introduce yourselves and the application that you're giving a deputation for.
My name's Mark Chevis. I work for Bellway Homes. I'm giving a deputation on the Tipner application.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman. My name's Darryl Howells. I'm a planning consultant. I'm speaking on behalf of the 6th Avenue scheme at Cosham. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Joey Morris, 372 Copner Road.
Thank you very much. And all three of you?
Good morning. Yeah, my name's Lee Roberts. Blimey, that is a little bit. I'm part of the speaking against 360 Copner Road planning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Hector and I'll be speaking on behalf of the residents of Tipner and Stemshaw.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's everybody introduced.
I'm Nikki Reid from Coastal Partners. I'm not actually giving any kind of deputation. I'm just here in case there's any questions that members have for item number 4.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you. Sorry to miss you out. Thank you. And Josh is here from the news. Good morning. No. Good. Apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Hunt. Any other apologies?
Councillor Ascar sent his apologies too.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any declarations of interest for today's meeting? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Yes, in terms of Prospect Road, application number 6, I'm
cabinet member with responsibility for the port and a director of our portico, so I've got a clear conflict of interest and I will leave the meeting at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Dent.
Item number 6, Copner Road, personal and prejudicial objections on that one, so I shall be leaving the room.
Thank you very much.
Chris?
Judith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on the Port Advisory Board, and I understand from previous applications I don't have a personal or prejudicial interest because I'm just advising the board, but I thought it was worth mentioning in the interest of clarity and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Okay, anybody else? No, we're good to proceed. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 12th of April, pages 5 to 16 in the pack. Are we happy with those members that were here? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Happy to propose them, Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith seconding. Thank you. I'll just sign those later. So glasses on and off today. These are not the right glasses, and so bear with me today. Councillor Shah. Good morning. Yeah, that's all right. We'll let you get settled. Shah, do you have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Okay. I'll let you get settled and then we'll...
I suspect Councillor Shah might want a seat with a microphone as well.
Oh, well spotted. Are you okay? We'll just let Councillor Shah get settled. And then we'll get on with today's substantive business. The first item is Tipner East. Agenda item 4. Edward, you're presenting.
Mic on? Yes, thank you, Chairman. Right. Hopefully you can see that on screen. Yeah. So this is an application 2101-357 FUL for 221 dwellings on land at Tipner East, just north of Stamshaw Primary Junior School. As members, I'm sure you're fully aware, Tipner East is a sort of jigsaw of 3 separate but interrelated sites at the moment, with this one being the southernmost one in the puzzle, shown on the red line here. To the north, you have the Vivid site, 835 units, which Planning Committee resolved to grant permission on in March this year. And then to the west, adjacent to the motorway, is the Park and Ride site, which again, outline planning permission was granted on for last year for a transport hub. Still awaiting reserve matters on that one. This is a full application as described. Let me just show you in colour, it's probably easier. So it shows the primary access to the development off Twyford Avenue and a secondary vehicular access off Tipner Lane to serve the westernmost 20% of the development. And then there is a pedestrian, cycle and non-motorised vehicular access off Target Road as well. So the 80% of the development will be accessed only from Twyford Avenue. The proposal, as I say, 221 dwellings comprising 41 one-bed units, 133 two-bed units, and 47 three-bed units, of which 30% or 67 units in total will be affordable to meet current council policy. One, isn't it? My laptop seems to have frozen. There we go. And that's the housing mix shown in tabular form. And that. So, as set out in the officer report, the main considerations are whether the proposals comprising the construction of new housing will contribute to the achievement of sustainable development in accordance with national and local policy, the acceptability of the design, traffic, transport implications, ecology, flood risk, sustainable design, site contamination, and residential amenity. Loss of trees was in the report and should be noted in the SMAT that is not a key issue given the current state of the site. The site extends to approximately 3.17 hectares or 7.8 acres in old money and comprises previously developed, recently raised and part remediated land. The relevant policies and SPDs are set out in the report. The planning history and comments from consultees are also set out in the report, and at this point I should apologise for the lack of paragraph numbers. A total of 54 objections have been received objecting to the application, along with a 380 signature petition, and the petition is against the opening up of Tipner Lane to vehicles. As I previously stated and as set out in the transport assessment submitted with the application, it is envisaged that 20% of the development would be accessed from Tipner Lane, with the remaining 80% off Twyford Avenue. Turning to the key planning considerations, there is a clear and pressing need for housing in Portsmouth. The City Council can only demonstrate 2.9 years housing land supply, and therefore, having regard to government policy in the NPPF, there is a presumption in favour of granting permission for this development, provided that none of the constraints set out in footnote 7 to paragraph 11 are brought into play in terms of loss of irreplaceable habitat, for example, in this case. And that is part of the reason why this scheme has taken the time it has to get to committee, because of the difficulties the applicant has experienced in securing suitable mitigation for the loss of what is a low-use Brent Goose site within the application site. But the applicant has secured adequate mitigation, and that will be secured within the 106 agreement if planning permission is granted. For your information, that mitigation land is on the Southmoor Nature Reserve near Havant, which is managed by the Wildlife Trust. Apologies, there seem to be. For some reason. Oh, there we go. The next few slides show some visual images of what the development would look like. The design rationale is that obviously to reflect the current vernacular around Tipner Lane Target Road of 2-storey, occasionally 2 stories with rooms in the roof type dwellings, moving northwards across the site with a gradual increase in height, so that the flatted blocks on the northern boundary adjacent to the Vivid site will be 3 or 4 stories in height, as shown on the street scene illustration on screen in front of you. This then reflects the change that will then occur, or is proposed within the Vivid site, to increase up to 10 or 11 stories on the northern side of their site, facing onto Tipner Lake. Further street scene illustration showing the transition in height, and that is the red line. I don't know whether how clearly you can see that, but that is a section line along the northern edge of the site, and some CGI images of within the development of how it would look. It will include local areas to play and other soft landscaping features to help mitigate against the loss of what is known as an open mosaic habitat on the site, which is a habitat that establishes on redundant land over time. It's not going to be fully replicated, but then that goes into the planning balance and is something that needs to be taken into account and has been taken into account by your officers in coming to the recommendation that we have. This slide finally shows and is borrowed from the Vivid presentation, but I think quite neatly shows how the three sites will interrelate with each other. Whilst the Vivid site is to be built in a number of phases over quite a few years, completion date I think is set for the early 2030s, the Bellway site, being 221 units, will be built in one continuous phase. Taking about, and I'm looking at about 3 to 5 years to build out. Thank you. So on the basis of all of these considerations, officers have concluded that there are significant planning benefits in redeveloping this site. These include the delivery of much needed housing, the provision of at least 30% affordable housing that meets the council's current needs in terms of tenure type and also wheelchair accessibility, etc. Environmental improvements and enhancements compared with the existing situation, and clearly job creation through the construction process. The recommendation, therefore, is set out in the report in front of you, is to grant planning permission, but with authority delegated to the head of planning to finalise the conditions and the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. We have deputations for this application. Mr. Hector, you're first up, and you have 6 minutes to give your deputation.
I would like to object to this planning application 21/01357/FUL for the 221 dwellings at Tipner East, on the basis that the current proposal allows access via Tipner Lane, which some residents believe will place excessive pressure on the busy bus route and road network in this location and severely impact the residential amenity of existing residents and negatively impact children and families attending Stamshaw Junior School on this route by the increasing risk of accidents and the level of pollution they will be exposed to. A resident who has lived in Tipner Lane for over 50 years has expressed serious concerns regarding the narrowness of the lane and the difficulty of navigating and giving way to oncoming traffic is already a challenge, especially at school drop-off and pick-up times. They report after the M275 was built that residents were assured that Tipner Lane would not become a through road. They sent their concerns to their developer Bellway by recorded delivery in June 2021, but did not receive a response. To be clear, the vast majority of residents are not opposed to the building of homes in East Tipner in principle, but to the access road and the inevitable rat runs that will impact Stamshaw and Tipner. After speaking to the community of Stamshaw and Tipner, many believe that Portsmouth City Council do not fully understand or have fully assessed the implications and impact that this access road proposal will have on the lives of the current residents. I would like to present a petition of 370 signatures of local residents of Stamshaw and Tipner objecting to this, which includes the signatures of Sitting Nelson Ward Councillors Jason Fasakri and Leo Madden. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hector. Have we had the petition? Have you handed the petition or sent the petition in? Yes. It's here, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, the petition was handed to the current officer.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your deputation. Mr. Chevis.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. My name is Mark Chevis. I'm the Land Director for the Wessex Division of Bellway Homes. The application in front of you today represents the culmination of quite a few years of hard work between Bellway, our consultant team, in liaison with Homes England, who are the landowners here, Portsmouth Council officers and the design review panel, and neighbours both existing and those planned in the Vivid scheme to the north. Bellway have been excited about the prospect of kick-starting the regeneration in Tipner since our involvement, and we are pleased to see the officers' report, which recommends approval. In my opinion, the report provides a detailed and clear rationale for recommending approval, and as such, I don't intend to repeat details within it, but on behalf of Bellway, I do want to just highlight a few points. Firstly, this is a fully detailed application, so if approved today, will enable Bellway to build and sell 221 new homes over a 3 to 5 year period, starting ideally later this year, which we hope will breathe new life into this vacant brownfield land that's been earmarked for many years. As you'll have noted from the site plan, the parcel of land is quite an awkward shape. This, coupled with the need to remediate parts of the site, while also respecting neighbouring development to the south and planned developments to the north, have presented some clear design challenges which have led to the development form and the layout before you. We've worked hard with officers to optimise the density on the site. The historic planning permissions that covered the site only had 153 dwellings between them, whereas the new layout has an increase of 44% to 221. This has been done at the request of council officers in order to make the most of this scarce land resource within the city. However, Bellway have always remained mindful of the transitional location between the existing low-rise communities of Stamshaw and Tipner and the proposed high-rise development to the north. Part of our brief at Bellway has been to meet the needs of families, so we have been trying to optimise the amount of houses on the site. The scheme provides 54 houses that will have ground level gardens. We've also retained a clear desire to provide plot-specific parking on the site, as this is undoubtedly a key issue for almost all of Portsea Island. We have sought to be realistic about the journey towards car ownership or reduced car ownership by striking a practical balance between convenience and seeking to avoid causing overflow parking on neighbouring roads. As a former resident of North End myself, I know how much parking matters in the city. Bellway are aware of concerns raised by residents in relation to the access via Tipner Lane. However, there is currently no through route proposed along our spine road, with a stop-up proposed, which means that only 45 plots, which is 20%, will be accessed via Tipner Lane. We have, at the request of council officers, been exploring opening up this route for a bus route, and we're confident that could be secured. It's important to note Portsmouth Highways have raised no objections to the proposals. The site has been subject to design reviews by experts, culminating in a design review panel process from March in 2022. This led to several design changes and has led to us master planning the site more cooperatively with Vivid to the north. The design review panel praised the submission that we put forward for grappling with lots of complexities on the site. We believe the site will be a well-connected, walkable neighbourhood, and it will with convenient and attractive accesses to local services, the Mountbatten Sports Centre, Alexandra Park and the Hilsea Shore Path. The revised master plan also shows how the site will interact successfully with the Vivid scheme and our existing neighbours. The proposals include space for street trees, pocket spaces, play areas, and will retain important trees and hedgerows. As the case officer mentioned, ecological considerations such as nutrient offsetting, biodiversity and overwintering birds have been resolved to the satisfaction of key consultees in Natural England. The provision of the off-site mitigation at Southmoor to offset the loss of a small area of wader habitat in partnership with the Isle of Wight Trust has now been secured and approved by the Council's ecologist in Natural England. There is a residual moderate impact, as mentioned, by the removal of some open mosaic habitat. However, as this habitat thrives on brownfield sites, it's almost unavoidable to lose such habitat when you're developing brownfield land. Whilst the loss is regrettable, the adverse impacts should be judged against the positive impacts of this site and helping to deliver increasing housing need in the city. The officer's report does provide a summary of the planning balance in this regard, concluding that the scheme should be approved. To conclude, Bellway has worked collaboratively with Homes England Council officers, key consultees and Vivid to refine the scheme before you. Combined with the Vivid schemes, these proposals will define a new character and identity of this part of Portsmouth as a high-quality connected waterside neighbourhood for the 21st century. Bellway are committed to delivering these homes in a quick time frame, and we remain excited about the opportunity. We therefore respectfully request that councillors endorse the officer's recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chevis. Members, questions? Councillor Smythe.
Thank you very much for your deputation about the concerns on the use of Tipner Lane. Could we see the plan that shows that and have a bit more detail about which 40 homes would in practice be using that access to the site? I appreciate it's blocked off, so there's no through traffic. And whether or not bicycles going through the site will be using that road, and whether or not we need to make some, or get the developer to make some improvements to Tipner Lane to make that be less of a challenge for people. I'd like a bit of detail really about that road layout and whether, so we can assess how difficult it will be. I have no doubt it will be difficult, more difficult than it is at the moment at school opening times and so forth, but of course some of the children will be coming from the new housing. And how many homes in that 40 are those who will have cars and car parking spaces? So just a bit more information, please, on that whole issue raised by the Deputy.
You put my mic on. Right. Councillor Smythe, thank you for your detailed list of questions there. So Tipner Lane is... This isn't going to work. So my mouse on here doesn't work, does it? No. Well, it is, but it's just... so Tipner... Right. Going up, right. Tipner Lane is, yep, will serve these 45 units in this area. Target Road will provide a non-motorised access to the site for pedestrians and cyclists. The Council's Highway Authority have requested a number of improvements to both Tipner Lane and Twyford Avenue to be secured by a 278 agreement, which will be secured via the 106. And in terms of parking provision, it's at or slightly below the council standard, with a combination of spaces for the units, but also parking courts for the flats and so on, and a number of what are called flats over garage units as well. You will note there is no on-street parking along the Spine Road. Should that be, and I'm told by the developer that that will be built to adoptable standards to allow for the future provision of a bus route. So yes, it's essentially the development in that part of the site that will be accessed via Tipner Lane, with the bulk of the site over on the eastern side accessing via Twyford Avenue.
Ask a supplementary, please. What are the specific improvements that we made to Tipner Lane, and what will the nature of the road going into the site north of Tipner Lane be that will make sure that there is safety for children walking to school, for example, people with a buggy, people with the need to see a separation between where they're walking and cars?
Chairman, if I may come back on that once I've had a chance to dig out the Highway Authority comments.
We'll come back, Judith, is that right? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Sorry, I've got a series of questions. First would be, where physically is the blockage to stop through traffic going? Because I understand that on the Spine Road, I think there's meant to be some sort of space so that people can't drive all the way through. Is that right, or am I getting it wrong? But if you're going to have a bus route, you can't have a stoppage.
as I understand it, there is a legal restriction on the passage of cars through the site, which would seek to be removed in the event that the bus route is a viable option.
But physically, it's if you can access it both from Tipner Lane and from Twyford Avenue, you've got a circular route. Is that right?
On the face of it, Councillor, that would be the case, but I'm advised by the applicant that there is a legal restriction to prevent that happening.
But how do you enforce that?
Through signage.
Which people will ignore.
A hefty fine, I think, Councillor.
Well, I think the only way of doing it is with camera enforcement to make masses of money for the council.
Is there a physical blockage or a...
But you can't have a physical blockage if you've got a bus route, unless you've got a bus rather like which can elevate and go over a physical boundary, rather like wacky races or whatever. But okay, so that's bemusing. Would be my first question. Second question is in relation to, we know there are issues with the development to the north of this, that the pressure from the council for money to be able to fund the bus route means that the Vivid scheme may well not be built. If we're asking for ongoing financial, for revenue costs for the bus route for 7 years from Vivid, are we asking the same from Bellway for servicing the same scheme with the same bus route? Pregnant pause for question to be answered. And then I have more questions.
Judith, may I ask you to turn your microphone?
There will be, Councillor, to answer that, there will be a negotiation to be had following this if the recommendation is carried in the discussions on the 106 with regard to bus contributions, certainly in conjunction with Vivid.
Okay. The bit that then follows for me is probably my biggest concern, which is in the report, and I'm trying to find the page, let me just quickly find it, about flood risk. There is a small paragraph on flood risk, because as I understand it, the presumption is that it is going to be protected from flooding by the work being done by Vivid to put in the sea wall. If we're uncertain that the Vivid thing is going to come forward, how is this going to be protected from flooding? Because there's no contribution towards flood defences here. It is in an area which the report says, and can I find the bit about flooding? It's in a very, very high risk of flooding area because the flood defences haven't been built. But there's no guarantee that the flood defences will be built. So if we give permission for this today, we will be doing so in the knowledge that the flood defences may not be built and that this area we're giving permission in a very, very high, very, very high risk of flooding. How is this going to be addressed unless we know that the Vivid scheme is going to be built out? And we don't know that at the moment.
Councillor, on that point, the Environment Agency were consulted on this application and they would have assessed it on a standalone basis without necessarily looking at it in conjunction with the Vivid scheme, and they raised no objections subject to conditions. Again, if you bear with me a few minutes, I can dig out their response.
Page 40, I think.
So the applicant submitted a flood risk assessment with the application, which the Environment Agency assessed. Sorry. their response is, we have no objection to the proposal provided that the following conditions be attached to any planning permission granted. Condition 1 is on flood risk and talks about finished floor levels not being set any lower than 4.6 metres above ordnance datum. And then condition 2 is on previously unidentified contamination land. Condition 3 is on infiltration of surface water into the ground and requires a sustainable urban drainage scheme to be submitted for approval by the planning authority. Condition 4 is on piling. Yeah, so the body responsible for managing flood risk in England, namely the Environment Agency, is essentially raising no objection subject to those conditions.
But the report says on page 40, thank you, Chair, for pointing it out, part of the site falls within flood zone 2 and 3, meaning that the site is at high risk of flooding. Could I ask through you if we could impose, if we do decide that we're going to give permission, can we put in an additional condition that says that any homes cannot be occupied until the flood defences have been built?
Councillor, I've listened to the discussion between officers and members, and it's clear that the Environment Agency have assessed this site on its own merits and have decided that the conditions that they've recommended in isolation are sufficient. Therefore, holding this development back until commencement or completion of flood defences at the site to the north would not be necessary in planning terms. It would not be lawful.
No, that's helpful. So you're directing us to oppose this and say no to it completely?
I am pointing out that you have adequate conditions in front of you, Councillor, in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Edward, did you want to add anything to that?
Not to that. I'm just trying to look up Councillor Smythe's.
Okay. Members, any other questions before we go back? Judith?
I'm also concerned about this particular sentence on page 40, the site at high risk of flooding, and I'd like a little bit more information, please, on how that is being mitigated. I do take the point that Kieran has made. You can't condition things that are outside the site in that way. But I am concerned that there's some mention here of the way in which surface water would be drained away. And I'd like a little bit more explanation of how that works. We had the similar discussion when we looked at the Vivid development. There's a lot of it going into Tipner Lake. There's also a mention, which I'm pleased to see, of the permeable surfaces here rather than impermeable surfaces, because that quick runoff into city sewers is what creates problems with pollution in the sea. But I just feel I'm not quite confident enough to express a view on this until I have a bit more information about how that's going to be dealt with, particularly at times when we have a flood risk generally because of high sea levels and other issues.
Indeed.
Supplementary to what Councillor Van Jackson was saying, really.
Yes. Edward, are we able to answer that?
I will need some time to find the relevant information.
Councillor Smith.
Can I just get some clarity on that point as well about the breach and the sea defences? Are we saying that the floor levels of these new houses being built are going to be, to the environmentalist's point of view, that they're going to be high enough to mitigate that until the sea defences are built later? Is that what's being said?
Chairman, if I can answer that. So the Environment Agency condition is stipulating a height of 4.6 metres above ordnance datum, which takes into account sea level rise due to climate change and is in isolation to the Vivid scheme, which involves the building of the sea wall. So this is, the Environment Agency have assessed this scheme on its own merits, and are raising no objection on flooding grounds, subject to that fairly critical condition requiring no floor slabs below that level, because that is the height that is forecasted, or that is deemed to be a sufficiently a sufficient height above any forecast rise in sea level due to climate change.
Yeah, sorry, just about that. Thank you for clarity on that, because I know back in the early days when we were talking about it, there was this thing that there was I raised the point that there was a breach in the wall in that part of the city, and they were saying about the fact that sea level rise was happening from sort of now, so that that needs to be mitigated by that floor level. Otherwise, we have a concern, don't we?
Indeed. Indeed. Any other questions, members, before we hopefully
Can I'm still bemused about how through traffic is meant to not happen,
we haven't,
except having a permanent traffic warden there taking note of anybody who does it.
well, we haven't got an answer to that.
Okay.
Sorry, and my supplementary question was similar to Gerald Redden Jackson's, which was that you know, we talk about there was going to be the minor road and the major road, and there was only going to be a certain amount of traffic. How can you make that calculational percentage if there is a circular route, as has already been said? I'd like to understand how the calculation has been done.
Edward.
That is apparent from the site layout plan, if I can identify the area. Oh. If we can go back to the slide. Yeah, thank you. So from the Tipner Lane entrance into the site, there is then a turning immediately on the right into the area of the development that will be accessed from Tipner Lane. There is no parking provision along the northern edge of these proposed units, so that this is the my point is now packed up. So I hope that's clear from the slide, but the parking area for those units is that one accessed immediately on the right as you come in off Tipner Lane. That area and there, with that being the entrance there from Tipner Lane.
Cars coming up Tipner Lane won't go any further than that. There's a sort of whiter piece of... how far north can cars go coming off Tipner Lane?
Well, the owners of those properties there, Councillor, will... their desire line will be to access their properties from that road I've just mentioned. I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask the applicants to just clarify this point about blockage and signage.
Are you able to?
Yeah, I can come back on that a little bit. I think in earlier forms of the layout, we had a physical set of bollards preventing the access going from one side to the other. Obviously, during consultation with Portsmouth Council Highways, they expressed the desire line for this bus link to go through. So the road that we'd narrowed and put bollards in had to be widened to get the curve radii of the bus link round. So the road is now wider, but the intention from our end was to put temporary bollards in until this bus issue was resolved one way or the other. And it may well be that the simplest solution is to put a bus gate midway point through that road, so then only buses can pass between one side and the other.
Thank you.
Will we therefore be able to put in something into the conditions that say that a bus gate is required? That is the standard way of doing it. It's an electronic gate that only a bus can open. Certainly we do want, I think, satisfaction about knowing it will not be a through way of traffic. And thank you for answering those questions that clarify it a little bit.
Yes, I think that's, yes, and rising bollards like currently exist on Tipner Lane as well. Yeah, there are ways and means of ensuring only buses can get through.
And proposed conditions, which you haven't yet written, include that?
with authority delegated to the head of planning, if permission is granted, we will certainly be including wording along those lines, yes.
Thank you.
Just go back to your question about surface water. Clearly, there will be a condition requiring a surface water drainage scheme to be submitted for approval. And clearly, as is in your gift, you can ask for these conditions to come back to committee for approval in the appropriate time. But looking at the flood risk assessment submitted with the application, runoff would be into Tipner Lake with adequate tide locking mechanisms to ensure that there wasn't a two-way flow.
Judith, are you comfortable, happy with the answer?
I think so. It's a pity we haven't got sort of much more detailed maps that we can look at and show those locations and things, I think, in this instance. Thank you.
Okay. Shall we make progress? No. Councillor Van Jackson. Comments?
So, I think I remain very worried about the flood risk. We're saying the floor level will be 4.6 metres above datum. High tide today is 3.8 metres above datum in Portsmouth. And quick look on my phone, I'm sorry, I can't find the height of spring tides in Portsmouth. But looking at the average national, it's over 2 metres above the normal high tide range. So I'm very worried that if we say yes to this now, we're doing it and without knowing the seawall will be built, that we are putting potential people living there at significant risk. I would have put a condition on to say that people couldn't, to say yes to the development, but people couldn't move in until the seawall is built. But Kieran says we can't do that. I don't want to say no because I don't think we know enough. So my proposal will be to defer this because I want to know more about the flood risk, because it would, even with the figures that we've got today, there is less than a metre between high water mark today and the floors of those places, and that I think is very risky. So I would like to propose deferral until we could understand more about the flood risk. I don't know if I'll get a seconder, but that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Further comments, members?
We're probably not on comments and proposals yet, but if that's going to be a proposal, then I'd be willing to to second that. But I would like to see a good deal more technical detail, so that we can see much more detail about how the flood risk is going to be mitigated, especially if the flood defences are not built.
Thank you, Judith. So we have a proposer and a seconder for a deferral. Any other comments or thoughts about this application from the floor?
And I think if we're going to defer it, it doesn't hurt to have more, to understand more about the proposal in terms of traffic, because I think my feeling is that the committee are not on the same page as the planning officers or the highways officers, and that we would be keen to follow what the developer originally wanted to do, which was to cut Tipner Lane entrance off so it's not a vehicular access. But so I think having more idea of and seeing some more detailed drawings of the road layout would also be helpful if we are deferring. I don't know if Judith would agree with that.
I do agree. I mean, comparisons are odious, but we had a much better set of slides to look at when we were looking at the Vivid scheme, which was much larger, but essentially rather similar. This plan that we've got and we've been looking at is almost impossible to read on the piece of paper we've got, and not very clear at all when you see it up here. And I don't think it would be responsible for us to approve it till we see a little bit more in detail about the exact layout of the where the high buildings are. The profile is useful, but it was a cut through. It's not showing us reality. And where the green landscaping is, where the hard landscaping is, we just simply, in my view, don't have enough detail, Chair, to make a proper decision today. And I'm happy to do it quite quickly. I'm sure you've got those plans, but the presentation we've got today isn't enough for me to make a clear, responsible decision.
Okay. Well, we have a motion on the table. We haven't got anything else other than the Gerald Van Jackson and Judith Smythe proposal. Anybody else? Okay. Well, that's...
Chair, I wouldn't see a problem with this coming back to the next committee because I don't think it would take long to get this together. But
does that sound doable?
I think it should be, yes.
Okay, so it's come back to the next planning committee. So shall we vote on the proposal in front of us?
Yes, that's fine. So you're deferring until the next committee in order to allow officers to bring back more detail in relation to flood mitigation and to highways proposals.
It's a little more than that, Chair. I would like to see, we've seen, what we've seen, I always look forward to the presentation because sometimes it's absolutely revelatory compared to the bits of paper we get. And that wasn't the case today. It's extremely difficult to see what was proposed. I don't have a clear picture, even though we've had the profiles through the site, which is a good presentation, that bit, but then we need to see in colour or in some form of differentiation where the two-bedroom houses are, where the flats are, where the green is, particularly. We don't really have any understanding about how green this site is going to be, and we mostly see much more detail of actually a site layout. So I really want to see all of those things when we all of those plans. Send them to us in advance, if you like, whatever. But at the moment, I just don't have a clear picture of the site, whereas in comparison, it might be worth going back to what we were given at the last but one planning committee for the Vivid scheme. We knew where things were much, much more than we do with this.
Okay. A revelatory presentation. Okay, that's what we've got to vote on. So members will...
Well, it's Councillor Vernon Jackson, and do you want me to summarise that for you, Chair? I think what Councillor Smythe is trying to do is to slightly expand Councillor Vernon Jackson's motion to include, as I say, flood mitigation, highways proposals, plans showing the scale of the development, and landscaping plans. Those are all issues you want further detail on at the next planning committee meeting. Yes. I've bundled that up with the highways proposals, but yeah, thank you.
So can I just ask through you, Chair, Karen, if we were of the view that we preferred the developer's original proposal, which was to not have through traffic from Tipner Lane, I would want that as an option for us to choose so that we wouldn't throw the whole thing out just because the developer and ourselves were of the same view, but a traffic officer at the council was of a different view.
Okay, so you're asking essentially for an optionality of an either-or condition in one case, or perhaps even an either-or Section 106 obligation in relation to traffic options that you would like to see from the developer for the committee?
Well, because that's what they originally put forward. It seems to be what the residents want, and I think we should at least have the option to look at that.
I think procedurally that's possible, but I defer to the officer in terms of what the planning merits or dismerits of that might be.
That's procedurally possible.
Okay, that's possible. Judith?
That needs to go hand in hand with the actual improvements to Twyford Lane that we're told, will be made in order to make that road safer for the additional 40 households to bring vehicles up to the bottom side of that, the site. I mean, I heard the deputation, it was very clear and very helpful. I think it would help us all to know what improvements to the road, off-site and the on-site bit, were going to be made, because that might make it easier for people to access the school anyway. It might widen the road in some way. We don't know, and we need to know the details, please. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're there. Members, so the motion is as...
Sorry, Councillor Smythe, you've expanded the remit of what you were initially asking for there, so I would again go back to the officer to see if that is possible in a 3-week turnaround, because that is a substantially larger piece of
when
work.
When I asked the question about the improvements to Twyford Lane that were going to be made, I was reassured there were going to be improvements. I'd like to know a little bit more about what those might be, because then only then can we compare it with the option of blocking it off.
The wacky races.
Edward,
is that doable 3 weeks?
Tipner Lane, yes, of course.
Let's also make the point, Councillor, that all these plans have been available on the council's website ever since the application was accepted and validated, and I'm, with no disrespect to Councillor Smythe and others, a little disappointed that these questions weren't asked at the pre-committee agenda briefing, for example, because I would have very happily come back. Forewarned is forearmed. I would have very happily come back with the information required today to progress this scheme through. But I think, having heard the discussion and debate that's been going on, it doesn't leave me with much option, I'm afraid, but to bring it back to a future meeting.
Well, we'll do the vote. And, that's okay. Thank you.
But sorry, is the officer happy that he can turn that work around in the next 3 weeks?
I do have leave booked, which does introduce an issue, so it may be the next but one committee.
The next but one. Which date's that?
Well, I would look at
6 weeks'
democratic
time.
services. Yes, it should be 6 weeks from now. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So the next but one, which should be... Second of August, is it? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, members, the motion is as summarised by Kieran.
12th of July.
12th of July. 12th of July. Back on the 12th of July. Okay, that's the motion in front of us. Those in favour of the motion? I think that's it.
It's a unanimous deferral until the 12th of July for the reasons discussed.
Okay, we'll discuss further in July. Now, the running order has changed a little to enable people to be able to go off and do other things. So we will move on to the coastal partnership application.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this is a request by Coastal Partners to have their discharge condition applications de-delegated back to officers rather than automatically going to Planning Committee. As you will see from the report in your agenda pack, this was following the determination of the application back in 2019-2020 for the South Sea to seafront from Long Curtain Moat to Eastney Barracks scheme, where an informative note was added to the minutes that it was the opinion of the committee that the aspects referred to in conditions 17, 22, 23, 25, 26, 27 and 38 should be brought back to the committee. The driver then was that there was only minimal but acceptable detail of public realm information on public realm features at the time. Just to refresh members on this, the application relates to this red line that follows the coastline from Long Curtain Moat in the west to along past Southsea Castle towards Eastney and the east. I've tabulated here a table of those conditions attached to that 2019 permission, and highlighted in yellow are the ones that are the subject of this report. So you will see that they've already been partially discharged in respect of subfrontage 1, but obviously they need to be discharged each and every time in terms of the other subfrontages as the scheme progresses from west to east. And as set out in the report, the level of design, detail, and knowledge and implementation is improving each time. And you will know that the phase 1 is now complete and has received positive feedback from the community, stakeholders and yourselves, and that phase 2 is now subfrontage 4 is progressing well. That's the one at Southsea Castle. To give you an example of what the sort of information that they will be submitting, so, you know, soft landscaping condition 17 requires details of a landscaping scheme. The images on screen, sorry, they're not very clear for you, are of plant types that would be used in such a scheme. They are not actual examples of what's growing within the scheme at the moment. I understand there were some issues with subfrontage 1 with plants that had been planted having then been removed or destroyed by members of the public within the early days. But any planning condition on landscaping does require that sort of issue to be resolved and replaced within for the 5 years following that decision. So that's soft landscaping. There is then, you know, details of lighting, condition 22, and the lighting scheme again will be consistent across the whole sub-frontage. As set out here, they are fabricated from a durable and sustainable timber finish, and where the listed lamp columns will be affected, they will be removed, refurbished and reinstated, and obviously listed building consent is required in addition for that. New lighting will be installed at regular intervals between the listed lamp columns to provide the lighting levels required. So a detailed and comprehensive scheme would be expected there. Street furniture, similarly, and I think what's been installed on subfrontage 1 is of good quality and durable. Hard surfacing materials, again, given the site location within a conservation area and obviously with listed structures adorning it and proximity to scheduled ancient monuments and so on, English heritage play a key role in agreeing this level of detail. And you know the ambition of everyone is to maintain the high quality of finish that I think is evident in subfrontage 1. Feature walls, I'm advised, are no longer in the design of the scheme, so that condition will probably be applied to be removed rather than complied with in due course. Roads and footpaths, again, detailed information will be submitted for future subfrontages to enable consistency across the whole scheme. And again with art and interpretation boards as required by condition 38. So hence this request from Coastal Partners to you. Your officers are satisfied that there is now a high level of knowledge of the character, quality and consistency of design than when the first application was determined. And also this would help expedite the process going forward and would meet the requirement for speedier and efficient decision making to aid the overall performance figures for the planning service and so on, and of course for the delivery of the defences themselves. I should add that this doesn't remove your right, as is always the right, for you to call in applications up to committee should you wish to do so in the future. But this just hopefully provides you with sufficient information to feel comfortable in perhaps delegating the details on the conditions that are listed here back to officers as the default rather than the other way around. So the recommendation as set out in the report is that to Planning Committee to agree that the determination of further applications can be delegated to officers subject to all the usual procedures regarding publicity, responses to statutory consultees and the ability of any member to call in applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. And we're joined by Nikki Reid from Coastal Partnership, who will answer any questions you might have about detail. So questions? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Can I ask, if we agree with this, what public forum would these come to where members of the public could make comments or questions?
Usual publicity would be applied to the applications, so site notices and so on would be advertised, and obviously they would be publicised on the council's website. And like I say, it doesn't override your rights as members of this committee to call in applications should you wish to in the future.
That wasn't my question, so if I could put my question again, what public forums will members of the public be able to come to comment on these if we agree with this recommendation? I think the answer is none, but I'd prefer to hear it from an officer than me say what I think what the answer is.
The answer is, in terms of forum, the answer is none, yes.
Judith.
I've thought about this a lot, long and hard. I was one of those who put these conditions in. I think Gerald Vernon-Jackson has put his finger on it, really, is that when we first started doing the sea defences, the public interest was extremely high in the design details, and it still is. I spend a lot of my time on the seafront, and a lot of people are very, very concerned about detail. And if I have to answer and say, I mean, last time I was quite happy saying, yes, we decided that we'd bring back these things to the Planning Committee. If they're brought back in the form that you've showed us here, in fact, you've almost done it, then I'd have no hesitation in approving them, with one exception. So you've almost done the bringing it back by showing us illustrative examples. I think it's important to know that when the sea defences were first discussed, there was considerable amount of discussion about whether or not the design should be slightly varied on different sections of the seafront. And it seems to me that I think what's been done so far is wonderful and of a huge high standard, but I don't think we've quite got the public lined up with what seems to be now said, which is it's going to be a uniform design right the way down. And in particular, we seem to have, without any consultation with the public, and there should have been, dropped the idea of any public art or of any different finishes to walls, which certainly were of huge public interest initially. And I think unless we can be satisfied, there is going to be some further there have been a series of stakeholder meetings to help with the design of the seafront. Unless we can't sit back and say we've done a beautiful stage one, which we have, and then say we'll just blanket provide that across the rest of the site. I'm in difficulties here. I think the team is doing a great job. I have no desire to delay them, but it wasn't an easy decision to keep back the conditions, and this seems to me as a kind of too easy decision for us to make now, unless there's our proper proposals for some proper public consultation on what is the most important feature in our city, in my view. This isn't just an engineering scheme. This is a really important part of our future in Southsea.
Are you stopping short of moving? Oh.
So I think Judy is right. I think the challenge that has come has significantly improved the design going forward, and I don't see why that should stop now. This is the most important part of the city, and where people from all across the city and outside come to take their recreation and their leisure, and we've got to get it right. And the detail is as important as the underlying engineering. So we've managed with significant discussions to really improve how the scheme is. And my worry is by saying that we're taking this out of coming to the planning committee, that we will miss that area of challenge both from councillors but also from members of the public. So I'm sorry, my proposal would be to refuse this and to stick with our original proposal. I'm sure if there are good proposals, they'll come up and they'll be passed through by the committee. If there are bad proposals, we should have the ability to be able to challenge them. This is the most important part of the city for recreation from families, etc. And we've got to go that extra mile to make sure that it is right. And the challenge has been good, the challenge has made it better, and therefore I would propose that we refuse this application.
Chair, I'd second what's been said by both of my colleagues, in as much that I think the success of the first part of the scheme is because of the extra scrutiny that's been put upon it, and I think keeping that extra scrutiny going forward, as has been said, I think is absolutely the right way to go.
Thank you, John. Are there further comments to be made? We have a proposal. I think that may be the way we're heading, looking around the room. Okay, well, there's nothing else. That's what we've got on the table. So the Vern Jackson Smith proposal to refuse. So these applications come back to us. Kieran? Oh, yes, please do. Kieran.
So I would summarise that as the committee moving to resolve to reject the officer report for reasons of the committee's continued interest in discharging conditions under this planning permission.
Thank you.
Can we add to that, and in view of the high public interest in this most important development? Please. Because we're doing this for the public. I'm doing it because I'm asked questions whenever I go down.
Judith, would you be so kind to repeat what you just said, because it was rather good, wasn't it?
Of the high public interest in this most important development of the city. It is. That's why we had a planning application.
Okay, we have a motion to vote on. Those in favour? I think that's it.
That's unanimous rejection of the officer report.
Thank you, Kieran. Thank you, Edward. I know you'll be leaving us now, so if you want to take a natural sort of a couple of minutes leg stretch while Edward sorts his technology out and goes off to do some other things, and then we'll carry on very quickly.